Glory to Ukraine and glory to Ukrainian heroes. Welcome at the Military Media Center. We are starting our briefing of the Security and Defense Forces of Ukraine representatives. Today you're going to be briefed by Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Hanna Maliar, Deputy Head of the Main Operations Department of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Brigadier General Oleksii Hromov, Deputy Director of the Implementation and Planning Department of the National Guard of Ukraine, Colonel Mykola Urshalovych, and the Chief of Environmental and Demining Security, Colonel Ruslan Berehulia. Please welcome Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Hanna Maliar. Good afternoon, everyone. Defense Forces of Ukraine stay united at all front lines, including the informational front line. Day 477 of Ukrainian struggle against Russian Federation. This war was going for 68 weeks and more than 11,400 hours. We are focused on strategy designed for success on the battlefield. We adhere to informational discipline, and we give our forces the opportunities to attack the enemy. Our warriors continue to demonstrate their bravery and progressively advance on the most difficult and dangerous front lines. Our warriors are fighting difficult and harsh fights during airstrikes and mortar and artillery shelling. As for now, the Armed Forces of Ukraine and the Security and Defense Forces are both in offensive and defensive condition. It means that we are advancing and defending in several sectors because the enemy is still advancing. In Bakhmut direction, the enemy brings up the reserves and is trying to prevent the advancement of the Ukrainian Defense Forces. We also recorded the movement airborne unit from the south to the Bakhmut direction, and the enemy is keeping to concentrate both weapons and material and personnel so as not to let our forces advance. At the same time, the defense forces make it impossible to implement the enemy's plans, and the enemy is not able to withstand our resistance and our struggle there. That is why over the 1 week and a half, the advancement and advances of the Joint Strategic Task Force Hортиця came up to more than 3 kilometers, and as for the southern direction, we are also having some progressive advancement, slowly but surely. At the same time, the enemy is struggling, and our forces deal with demining, mine clearance of minefields, the active usage of suicide drones, and the enemy is not willing to give up its positions that easily. And that is why there is a powerful confrontation with the strong enemy, the Russian Federation. The main purpose of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine is inevitable, remains the same, to be the framework and support of the armed forces of Ukraine. We provide and sustain armed forces with the necessary resources. Over the last period, 4 armor vest model of and 4 model of helmets have been supplied to the armed forces of Ukraine. The Prozoro system was used in this process. We also dealing with contract to include contracts. We also deal with the women armor vests, and also armor vest with positive buoyancy. We are also interested in a broad extension of procurement of weapons and personal protective equipment. Sorry. We also deal with the summer BDU and special underwear for military service women. We also deal with the necessary documentation. The second stage of research and development and testing for summer BDU for women have been completed. We take into account the suggestions of service women, and they were tested during this process as well. I want to remind you that the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine informed that we create an innovation development accelerator. We can see that how this search platform for weapons and equipment is dealing, and this accelerator will expedite this work and process. As for now, the most up-to-date and relevant systems are UAVs, reconnaissance, and analysis. We also have to deal with the modernization and upgrade of ammunition, weapons, and equipment. That is why I want to pay your attention to all interested developers and stakeholders to suggest your issues and proposals. At the same time, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine holds the legal front line, and we were able to bring back the property area which previously was taken from the ownership of the armed forces and the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. This property system and facility was brought back to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. As a result of our operation, we were able to protect rights and freedoms and interests of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. We are also tracking how the enemy is waging an informational war, and now they are spreading two discourses. The first one is about huge losses of the personnel of the armed forces of Ukraine, and it is focused to demoralize and hurt morale of our forces and increase morale of the enemy. But in this situation, we can tell that first, during the war, no party is posting its casualties, because they're always changing, and based on this data, the enemy or another side and party can regulate their plans and make changes. But we can have correlations, and the correlation is that since the beginning of the 2013 and since the beginning of February 24, the correlation of forces was the number of killed from the Ukrainian side were several times lower than the losses of the enemy. And yesterday we shared the figures as we talked about last week at in the Hortitsa Joint Strategic Task Force operation area. The enemy had 9-fold higher losses than we sustained. However, every warrior is an irreparable loss for us, and if we talk about the southern direction, 5.3 correlation towards the enemy. And we highly value every life of Ukrainian soldier. The second narrative they are spreading is that they try to undermine assistance and support provided by our partners. Namely, they are trying to undermine the provision of assistance of weapons, namely material provided for Ukraine. You can see on this slide a Ukrainian Bradley after a direct hit of Grad MLRS. The second picture is the crew of this Bradley vehicle. They have been evacuated and they continue to fight. The damaged Bradley is undergoing a repair. The people from the 47th Brigade are informing us, and they say that Bradley received a direct hit in the turret. The crew crew has been evacuated and the driver relocated the vehicle and put out the fire. As a result, they had a concussion. From now on, we can say that survivability of these vehicles are not just in words. This is the steel, and it's very effective and efficient. And there is no equipment that can be destroyed, but there is equipment that saves lives. We not only liberate the territories, but create favorable conditions to restore life in there. Ukraine does everything to hold Russia accountable for its atrocities. For every killed person, for destroyed hospitals, kindergartens, Russia has to be held accountable. 2023 is the year of retaliation. Glory to those who fight. Rest in peace for those who lost and gave their lives for Ukraine. And the detailed information will be provided by the representative of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Thank you. And now we're going to be briefed by the Deputy General of the General Staff, Brigadier General Oleksii Hromov. Good afternoon, everyone. The Russian Federation continues to wage war of expansion against Ukraine. We cannot see any signs of mobilization, demobilization, and preparedness for further advanced actions around Ukraine. However, at the same time, the aggressor tries to perform indiscriminate mobilization measures and activities around Ukraine to send them back to Ukraine and replenish losses. As they always do, the Russian authority is trying to solve these recruitment and mobilization issues through the recruitment and enlistment of prisoners. According to our information, 460 prisoners have been mobilized. If they reject their suggestion and proposal to join the ranks, there are special criminal articles designed for those who rejected proposals. However, the Wagner private military company said that they ceased to recruit prisoners to their ranks. As for now, the operational situation has not undergone any changes. The task of the enemy remains the same: to advance to Donetsk and Luhansk borders. In Donetsk operational area, the main efforts of the enemy are focused on offensive actions in Kupiansk, Liman, and Mariinka directions. In Kupiansk direction, the enemy intensified assault actions in the vicinity of Masyukivka, Kharkiv region, where we saw projection of personnel, namely recruited prisoners. At the same time, the enemy continues to sustain casualties. Over June 3 and 4, more than 200 heavily injured and wounded servicemen have been sent to hospitals in the temporarily occupied territories in Luhansk. In Liman direction, the enemy continues to use army aviation and other groups to engage our troops. Ukrainian warriors in the vicinity of Serebryansk, Berehulia and Spirne engage the enemy and give them no opportunities to advance. The occupiers and invaders perform defensive actions because the Second Army of the world cannot do more. Defense forces of Ukraine continue to engage in the vicinity of Bakhmut and do their best to liberate Ukrainian territory from the invaders. According to our data, the enemy continues to send troops to replenish their losses and positions. The hospital in the vicinity of Persianivka in Russia is full of wounded. We also stated that one of the Z Storm company sustained irreparable losses of 70 people. Among Russian recruits who came to the front line, we can see panic, psychological state and low morale. Among those invaders who are located and stationed in Bakhmut, we can state there are talks and discussions about self-mutilation to be able to evacuate to the Russian territory. Servicemen of one of the regiments try to force every other serviceman to fight and be able to gain some losses as part of assault units. Our warriors do not let the enemy seize Marinka and Avdiivka. In the Vuhledar direction, our enemy is organizing the terrain, namely engineer obstacles. In Zaporizhzhia direction, over the last week, our troops advanced up to 3 kilometers in Melitopol direction. We also liberated 7 settlements in Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia regions. We regained control of 103 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. In Kherson direction, we focus on organizing defensive lines. After the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant has been destroyed. At the same time, the enemy is trying to preserve constant military presence in Bryansk, Kursk and Belgorod regions, as well as on the territory of Belarus. The main efforts of the enemy are focused on reinforcing defensive positions and perform subversive activities on the Ukrainian borderlines. The Kremlin authority continued to issue criminal orders to engage civil infrastructure installations in the Ukraine. Thus, over the last 2 weeks of June, the enemy used more than 140 missiles and more than 250 UAVs, strike UAVs. We can say that the aggressor is focused on targets related to logistics, infrastructure, industry, and oil and gas. In addition, the enemy increased the number of tactical groups and task forces of missile troops in regions and areas bordering Ukraine. Or our data, the BAL coastal missile system artillery battalion is very effective. It can engage up to 500 kilometers and enables to reach Zhytomyr, Kyiv, Poltava, Cherkasy, Chernihiv, Sumy and Kharkiv regions. At the same time, the enemy continues to terrorize border cities of Chernihiv, Sumy regions, dropping guided gliding bombs. Given the ongoing missile attacks, our air defenses are getting stronger, and including by the supply of weapons and equipment provided by our partners. I want to remind you that over June, MiG-29 aircraft have been supplied from Poland and Slovakia. We are also we also hope to see F-16 fighters in the Ukrainian sky. Since the beginning of June, air defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed 74% of all the guided missiles used by the enemy and about 55% of strike UAVs. At the same time, I want to congratulate the air defenses of Ukraine on units on the destruction of 300th helicopter. And at the same time, the number of destroyed helicopters of the Russian Federation is five times more than during the war in Ichkeria and other conflicts. I want to say that the damage inflicted to air defenses is not only by the missiles but also screens and posts in Telegram channels and other internet sources, because after the videos and photos posted, the enemy is trying to seek and find our positions. That is why you have to think twice before posting some photos, images and videos. Think twice when you post it on the internet and think of people's lives. Defense forces of Ukraine continue to conduct defensive and stabilization activities in our operational areas. They perform active positional defense in Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia areas, and in some areas they are advancing and liberating our territories step by step. We have the motivation of the highest level because we have to protect our homeland from the enemy. Ukrainian army has gained significant experience and mastered and expertise on the battlefield. We are ready and will continue to fight until we liberate our territory with even our bare hands. But we have our weapons provided by partners. And we are grateful to you for that. We are grateful to the whole democratic world. Please believe in the armed forces of Ukraine, believe in Ukraine, and believe in our victory. Thank you. Thank you, General, for your briefing. And now, please welcome representative of the National Guard of Ukraine, Colonel Mykola Urshalovych. Glory to Ukraine. Over the last week, the Putin's regime continued armed struggle and aggression against our state. They concentrated main efforts on combined missile attacks on civilian infrastructure and in order to retain temporarily occupied territories and restore their lost positions. National Guards continue to perform their tasks as part of defense forces of Ukraine and show signs of high combat effectiveness. In Kupinsk-Liman-Sieversk direction, the enemy used tube and rocket artillery and inflicted and launched aviation strikes on our positions of the National Guard. Despite that, we did not lose our positions. In Bakhmut direction, National Guard strike UAV, crews and detachments assisted the advancement of the armed forces of Ukraine. In the vicinity of Vremivka and Velika Novosilka, National Guards retained their positions and do not enemy advance. In Orikhiv direction, separate units of the National Guard performed their offensive and assault activities as part of defense forces. Despite the high volume of mine obstacles and intense artillery shelling, we have partial success and we have advanced in up to 650 and 1500 meters in the vicinity of Novopokrovka. In order to prevent the collapse of the front line, the Russian terroristic regime was forced to resort to FSB machine gun units in separate directions. From our part, National Guard servicemen continue to perform and to inflict casualties to the enemy in manpower and material. Over the last week, our units destroyed up to 80 invaders, including 42 KIA and other vehicles material. We also destroyed and detected the enemy targets. Our special purpose units destroyed up to 25 liberators in the vicinity of Liman and Donetsk directions. They also destroyed 4 tanks and 1 special purpose vehicles. 27th Pechersk Brigade, Area Reconnaissance Brigade, performed higher results in Liman, Donetsk, and Zaporizhzhia directions. They detected and destroyed 14 tanks, 1 self-propelled artillery system, 7 armored fighting vehicles, and 1 special purpose vehicles. National Guard artillery personnel destroyed up to 170 personnel of the enemy in Liman and Zaporizhzhia directions. National Guard aviation performed 16 combat sorties to engage the enemy. As a result, they destroyed 25 invaders, 2 ammunition dumps, and also engaged platoon strongpoint and 3 dugouts with personnel. Unmanned aviation units in Zaporizhzhia and Kherson direction performed 21 combat sorties to detect 2 tanks, 1 self-propelled artillery system, 1 gun, 7 armored fighting vehicles, 11 special vehicles, and to provide grids and coordinates for these systems. As an example, we also destroyed Solntsepek TOS-1A Russian system in Zaporizhzhia direction. It happened on June 9. Our units adjusted fire and engaged this system. National Guard personnel works alongside other units, namely the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, to help people who were trapped under the destruction of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant. Over these weeks, we rendered assistance to 500 people, including 3 children, and evacuated people and animals as well. Our servicemen also provide medical assistance. Since June 14, we performed EOD activities in the areas where the water has lowered. And totally we had 32 personnel as part of 6 groups and demining teams. Over the last week, we performed demining tasks of the agricultural areas on the deoccupied territories in Kherson and Sumy regions. Our units surveyed and searched 1,640 hectares of terrain and disposed of 75 explosive ordnance. We also maintain legal martial law regime activities and allocate 300 guard personnel. During this time, we also detained 50 perpetrators. National Guard units provide security and protection of 33 ministries, departments, and administrations. Over the last week, we also provide security for 111 diplomatic missions, council agencies of foreign states, and representations of foreign organizations in Ukraine. To ensure the curfew and martial law provisions, we allocate 1,200 personnel. National Guard personnel is working as part of 77 mobile patrols and 46 K9 specialists with service dogs. We also perform check measures at entry and exit posts around Ukraine. In addition, National Guard personnel took part in 39 counter-sabotage activities in 114 settlements around Ukraine. As a result, we checked 7,618 addresses, surveyed 3,848 vehicles, 12,738 people, and 2,226 mobile terminals. We also detained 76 people for administrative crimes. Overall, during these martial law tasks and curfew tasks, we detained 2,221 people, including 81 people for criminal proceedings. We seized one gun, cold weapon, ammunition, and drugs. National Guard personnel continue to perform their tasks in order to prevent the unauthorized border crossing around Ukraine. And there was the West 2023 Special Purpose Border Operation conducted recently. As a result of this exercises, we secured 12,355 people. As for the last week, we were also able to perform exchange of 95 Ukrainian defenders, including 29 National Guard personnel. We also released 512 National Guard personnel. National Guard of Ukraine provides medical and psychological rehabilitation and support to Ukrainian soldiers and for those who came back from Russian activity. Ukrainian National Guard servicemen defend Ukraine in all front lines. Let's stand united for the victory. Thank you. Thank you, Colonel Urshalovych, for your briefing about the National Guard and about the environmental situation. You will be briefed by Colonel Ruslan Berehulia. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to discuss and have a briefing that the Russian occupation forces seized this Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant on February 26, 2024, and the different manipulations of this power plant started in October 2022. On May 21, 2023, before the destruction of this Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, the occupiers and invaders stopped to perform any support activities of this area. And after that, the President of Ukraine stated that invaders mined this power plant. On June 6, 2022, Norsar Norwegian system fixed an explosion in the vicinity of Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, and it states the higher power of explosion. There are no signs of external destruction from the plant and on other facilities, and it means that there were internal mining of this power plant. A lot of media started to discuss that this destruction was performed by the HIMARS missiles. However, it is impossible to destroy this power plant with HIMARS missiles because its warhead is not enough. And the destruction was performed after the advance of Ukrainian forces in several sectors, immediately after the advance. I want to say that Soviet units back in the 1941 had to use hundreds of thousands of explosive to destroy some areas in Ukraine before the retirement and withdrawal. The destruction of Kakhovka power plant could lead and can lead to environmental problems and dangerous effects. I also like to add that since May this year, the Russian forces mine hydroelectrical facilities in Kherson and Donetsk areas, and they try to flood the areas to create artificial and man-made obstacles for our advances. And now about the mines and danger. The flooding of several areas that have not been surveyed and checked and can also lead to the destruction and flooding of YRM mines of the enemy. Our priorities for survey of terrain is in the island district in the vicinity of Kherson, because before the flooding there were 6,000 people living there. There's also a danger of mine explosives in the shore of the Black Sea. To clear these areas, we have already involved mine clearance teams from the armed forces of Ukraine, from the State Special Transport Service, State Emergency Service, National Police, National Guard, and K9 specialists. As for the results of the survey, we surveyed 1,500 meters of terrain, 1.5 hectare, and we detected 6 naval mines. Now, as for Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, the energy facilities, the energy blocks are safe. The water pumping from the pond to the cooling area is stopped because of the low level of Kakhovka power plant, hydroelectric power plant. The water level in this pond is stable. We have enough water to cool the reactor, but in the future these coolers will require water pumping resources as well. 612 square kilometers of terrain have been flooded at the very beginning of the destruction. It's many square kilometers of Kherson region and more than 60 square kilometers in Mykola region. On the occupied territories, flooded areas are dangerous. We also know that there is a leakage of chemicals to the areas, and it can also lead to the higher level of environmental and epidemiological situation there. The threat of flooding is in some areas is absent. In the vicinity of Olhivka and Atradakamenka, we recorded the flooding of 2 cemeteries. 5 pumping stations have been also, and waste stations have been flooded as well. And the main waste pumping station has also been flooded. It also led to the flooding of chemicals into the river of Dnipro. At the same time, the seal level of chemicals has also been damaged in the vicinity of Kherson. It led to leakage of such chemicals to our environment. As for now, in the flooding areas, 17 gas stations and 2 oil terminals are located. The threat of flooding also affects the environment. As for now, at the very bottom of Kakhovka power plant, there are layers of mud and they accumulated pesticides and other chemicals from the agriculture activities. There are also lead, mercury and other heavy metals there. Some layers of the mud will have radiological contaminations. The overall volume of water in this plant was more than 18 meters, cubic kilometers. It was more than 7% of total water flooding and going to the Black Sea per year. Most of this water will flow to the Black Sea, and it will freshen the Black Sea as well, and it will lead to the destruction of fish at the shore. The Black Sea areas were also flooded, and there are many layers of mud there. Thank you, Colonel, for your information. We are grateful to our briefing. This is Military Media Center, the only information platform of the Security and Defense Forces of Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Let's protect what is ours.